My man Czar make tracks like this.
What's going on, y'all? I want to give you my review of the Roswell Delphos II, and I'm speaking to you right now through the Delphos II going into a La Chapelle 500 DT Pre. The Delphos II is, of course, an update over the original Delphos, which was a popular mic for Roswell. If you're not familiar with the Delphos, it's a large diaphragm condenser mic that is transformerless. Now, the Delphos II, of course, is going to add some new features from the original. We still going to give you the same sound, but it now has a figure 8 pattern, so you now have cardioid, omni, and figure 8. Also has some updated circuitry and DC power supply that's going to help lower the noise. And on the outside, you'll notice that it now shares the same body style as the Colaris, which is something that I prefer. I think that it helps the mic stand out when compared to other mics, especially with the nice navy blue paint job that the Delphos II has. The frequency response is 20 Hertz to 16K, so it starts to roll off at 16K, which gives it a more of a warm sound. And Roswell describes this as a premium microphone with vintage tone. That rolling off of the high end gives it some vintage tone to me. It also has a very high output compared to other transformerless mics that I have that I've compared it to. It has a higher output than all of those mics. Maybe I'd say somewhere between 6 and 8 dB more sensitivity there that I've noticed with the Delphos II. But let's take a listen to some examples that I've recorded with the Delphos II. So just a quick note, I'm no longer speaking into the Delphos II, I'm speaking into my Rode Procaster. And this is an artist named Jemiah Hudson. You can follow her on IG here. And we recorded this with the Delphos II into a Chameleon Lab 7603, which is one of my favorite pre's for female vocals. It just adds a little bit of low-mid warmth there. That just sounds really nice on female vocals to me. I've got no processing here. I have just a little bit of reverb and delay going on. And what I'm going to do is we're listening to these bottom three pink tracks here. So I'm going to play it and then we'll discuss it.
Running in circles, going out my mind. You won't even answer and you waste my time. You got me fantasizing. All your words loving, but I don't care. 'Cause your love has got me hypnotized. Now I'm like, ooh.
So the processing I felt needed to be done with this was a little bit of compression. Some of the softer parts were getting buried a little bit, so I'm going to engage this compressor here so you can hear what it'll sound like with some compression. My goal here with the compression is to level out the vocal as well as bring it to the forward some. As far as EQ, the only EQ that I did was roll off some of the low end in the fat channel here. Actually, all of these fat channel tracks you see here just have some low end rolled off because the track had an 808 in it, and that 808 was starting to bleed into the microphone a little bit, so I just rolled that off. But let's take a listen to this with some compression.
Running in circles, going out my mind. You won't even answer and you waste my time. You got me fantasizing. All your words loving, but I don't care. 'Cause your love has got me hypnotized. Now I'm like, ooh.
So there's two things that are sticking out to me that I'm noticing here with this vocal. One is the low-mid clarity, which is really where transformerless mics earn their money, in my opinion, is the clarity that you get from them. The other is the sibilance. The S's are really smooth. They're not poking out. I'm really impressed with how well the Delphos II is handling sibilance. So a very solid vocal take here that requires little to minimum processing, which is great. You know, if I go to mix this, and you see just on all the channels, I just have a fat channel. And I mean, on that fat channel on each one, all I did was roll off. I've had to do no EQ, which is great. Now, the microphone I do feel is just a little on the darker side, but it's not a microphone that I would call dark. It only gets darker to me when compared to some other microphones I've compared it to, which have just ended up to be a little brighter. And I'm not a fan of dark mics on vocals, but it's just like just the right amount of darkness I feel to it. I wouldn't call it a bright mic, but even though it's rolling off at 16K, you still have high-end detail there. A lot of mics I've got to push the high end or try to roll off some of it because it gets real essy. So very nice, balanced frequency response that we're getting with the Delphos, and I feel like some of the low mids you're hearing there is you're hearing being brought out by the Community Lab 7603, the mic pre that we use for this. Let's move on to another example. So here I've got some electric guitar that I've recorded through the Delphos 2. The blue track will be the Delphos 2, and the green track is the SM57, which is a popular mic to put on electric guitar cab. The Delphos was mic'd through a AMS Neve 1073, and the SM57 was through an Elysia Sculptor. So I've got it looping here. I'm going to let it loop once with the Delphos 2, and then I'm going to switch it to the SM57, and then I'm going to let it go a few times as I switch between the two through the loop. And we're going to start with the Delphos 2. So compared to the SM57, the Delphos sounds fuller, more open, and I really like how it sounds there on the electric guitar. Let's move on to another example. So this is some bass guitar that I recorded with the Delphos 2. The preamp I used was the Chandler TG502, which is one of my favorite pre's for bass. So let's take a listen to this. So I'm really in love with the bass sound that I got here with the Delphos 2. Very full low end. It's also has a clean sound to it. Normally in this studio, I record the bass with a Sennheiser 451, I believe the model is. The Delphos, just like with the SM57, and I know we're comparing a condenser to a dynamic mic, but I mean, comparing those two, you can really hear on the Delphos just how it opens up. But on the bass, I really liked how the low end definition came through on with using the Delphos 2. So on the box, Roswell advertised this as the premium studio microphone with a warm, unhyped, and natural frequency response. I agree with this. I feel that the warmth comes from the rolling off of the 16K on the high end for it not to be as bright. And I really feel that it does have a natural frequency response. Everything's balanced, and I feel it just gives you whatever you put into it is what you're going to get out of it. A vintage tone, full and warm frequency response with a neutral top end invokes vintage tube models. I don't know if I'd say it really sounds like a tube to me, but I do agree that it is a very full sounding microphone. High output, high sensitivity, low noise circuitry sounds fantastic through any preamp. So the high output, now let's talk about that. Uh, the high output of this microphone means that it has a high sensitivity, which means that you don't have to use as much gain from your mic pre. You're going to get a lot of output, or the signal coming out of this microphone is going to be hotter than most microphones, and what that allows is for you to use less gain on your mic pre. What that does for you is allows you to get more tone from the mic than from the pre. If you want to get more from the pre, you can use the 10 dB pad and then crank the gain on your pre to get more tone out of the preamp. And it says that it sounds fantastic through any preamp. Every preamp that I've used it through, it sounded great. I wasn't really a fan of the PreSonus Quantum pre, but that is a interface pre. But any standalone pre that I've used it with, so far, whether it be a tube, solid state, transformer, it's all sounded great. If I had to put a con on the mic, maybe that it doesn't have a high pass filter, which really isn't a big deal. So many standalone pre's have a high pass filter, and worst case scenario, I could roll it off in the DAW when I'm mixing. And one thing I want to point out is that because the Delphos 2 shares the same body style as the Colaris, the shock mount fits both mics. So if you have a Colaris and a Delphos 2, you can easily swap the mics on the shock mount without having to do a lot of work. So lastly, let's talk about the price. So this is $899. Comes with a 1-year warranty. If you register it, once you purchase it, that'll bump it up to a 2-year warranty. Everything's hand built and QC'd in California, so the quality is there. So I highly recommend checking out the Delphos 2 if you're looking for a really clean, full sounding microphone. One more quick note, Jemiah was shocked when I sent her the rough mix of, the song here, and I told her I didn't use any EQ. So, it's microphones like this that just makes mixing easier when you get a good sound up front with the microphone. Any questions, comments, let me know, and I'll catch y'all next time.